Hey there, and welcome to the first episode of the Dead and Dusty Dad podcast, where I talk about things in relation to my dead and dusty dad. You see, he died about 2 years on ago now. 2023 is when he died, in case you're watching this in the future, and it's no longer relevant to say 2 years ago. With this first episode, I pretty much just want to start covering some questions that I thought would help flesh out my old man because, well, in the process of putting out the big game analysis videos, I don't always get to talk about him in the context of things outside of what comes up during the game. Part of this is that I am raising awareness for transmasculine individuals, since he was a trans man himself before he did the ultimate gamer move and died. Without further ado, let's get ahead to some of these questions. I found them online. Everybody asked to help give me some questions. Didn't provide me with any questions yet, so I'm just gonna go with some questions that I could reword as things that would fit this, or that I've restructured to work well with this. First question: what kind of person was your old man when he was at his best? I would say that at his best, he could be loyal to a fault, and that he stuck his loyalty with quite possibly some of the worst people he could have done so. I like to compare our family's greatest with that of dogs. For a while there, we worked for the English crown, and we were, guard dogs, attack dogs, that sort of thing. And in our time in the United States, we often joined the military, and within the military, a lot of us were Marines. One of my second or third cousins, I believe, is still in the Marines. She joined up a while ago, and part of the one of the Marine things is semper fidelis, always faithful. So I would say that at his best, he would generally try to be there for people, even if he still messed up a lot. And he did mess up a lot. Next question: what were his passions or hobbies? Well, let's see. He liked woodworking. That's one of the things that I want to get into one of these days. I want to make shelves and stuff. I want to make I want to build the shrine that I have planned for him in his urn, and then all the little trinkets and stuff to go around him, some of the collectibles. I've still got the Witcher 3 medallion from the pre-order launch of that. I've got the Elduin statue. I've got a Johnny Silverhand little dude, almost like an action figure or something. I've got a bunch of other stuff too that we got. I want to say safety, a security box thing from GTA 4's release. I'm not sure if I was able to grab that from my grandparents before shit went down with them. He also loved to fish. I hate fishing in general. Nearly every video game that has fishing in it, I don't like the fishing mechanics of it. But he loved it. When we went fishing, I generally would catch more fish than him, which was always funny to me. You would think the objective of fishing is to catch fish, but he would say that, oh, it's so he can clear his mind and stuff. And I'm like, you could do that through just meditation on a cool rock or something. Cool either in temperature or the cool factor of the rock. Like if you found a rock with a really big pair of shades, that would be really cool. Or if the rock was in the shade, it would be cool in terms of temperature. Next question: what values did he teach you, even if he didn't say them outright? The first thing that came to mind, right, isn't so much like a moral value, was that he taught me that if you're going to have an emotional or mental breakdown, you should try to do it in a bathroom because then you have pretty good access to running water. Now, this does imply the fact that at some point in his life, he did break down for an extended period of time, which water would be a necessity. And so he did have to lock himself into a bathroom in order to do so. I don't know what the context was behind that, but it's always something that I think about at times. So I guess it's just that crying isn't bad. It's a natural, healthy thing to do, and you better stay hydrated because you're leaking all kinds of wetness out of your eyes. The next question is, what's something funny or weird that he used to say or do? He would straight up eat raw potatoes. Pretty sure you're not supposed to do that. That's something that comes to mind. He Yeah, he would just put salt on them, kind of like how you do with like tomatoes. I don't eat tomatoes, like just raw by themselves or whatever. But he would eat just like potatoes, and I'm just like, man, that wasn't great. What other things would he say that's rather funny? I admittedly, a lot of my memories that have him in it, he's like a blur or whatever. My mind's trying to protect me from the stressors that come with remembering him. So a lot of my memories, and because a large part of my life, so a large part of my life I just don't remember anymore, which sucks. Other things that he would do that weren't just like negative or annoying things, I'm trying to think of. We'd uh we'd often get into like calls because he had nighttime. He would go on his newspaper route, and he we would get into calls. So we had some pretty fun nighttime conversations about whatever. Sometimes he would ask what's on like Adult Swim or whatever, and I would relate to him what's going on in Adult Swim. Generally speaking, it was more just like whatever's going on the route. One of the funniest stories that I have is something tangential. He was talking to another newspaper delivery person, and it was some older dude. And this guy was delivering his papers in an area where it's like you could run into bears and stuff. And so, he had to be careful with like the bushes and all that. And he was just driving along, and out came not a bear, but just some dude, some presumably homeless man, who asked this delivery driver for newspapers at 3 a.m., "Hey man, what time is it?" And it's just like, out of all the things you're gonna ask, you wanna know what time it is? And you would think he'd be like, "Oh shit, I gotta go somewhere." Nah, he just wandered back into the bushes, and just the delivery guy never saw him again. So somewhere out there is just some urban legend ass homeless guy that's just some bush dwelling time lord or something. On to the next question. How did he express his gender or identity day to day? I would say that he was fairly br- blunt, maybe even, is brusque the right word? But he kept his hair cut relatively short. He tried to grow facial hair, wasn't super great at it. He was heavily tatted up, and that's not like gender specific, but similar to my uncle, in that my uncle likes to emulate biker styles. They were both fairly punkish. They were into like heavy metal stuff. So I think a good chunk of that is from 80s rock stars, is how he'd try to emulate them and how they dressed or how they had tattoos. So I would say a big part of his gender expression was just along those lines. He was broke as shit, so he didn't really dress up anything too fancy. A lot of like denim jackets, t-shirts that had like those gangster t-shirts of like the Warner Brothers characters or whatever, or like it's nowadays it's a lot like SpongeBob and Patrick like crossing their arms and looking thuggish, just like stuff like that he would wear, or like a Chinese dragon surrounded by like electricity, things like that, just like that's I, I don't know how gender-tastic that is, but that's how he did it. On to the next question. What was your relationship like over the years? So, early childhood and stuff, for the first 5 years or so, my old man and my birth giver were together, and then they broke up because he found out that she was cheating on him with a bunch of different guys, and also that she was still doing hard drugs. He eventually headed down to Florida, and then he came back after that didn't go too well. And so I would see him on and off until my birth giver's husband died eventually of heart failure. It ran in the family for him. I in fact tried to explain that he probably needed to go to the hospital because he was like turning purplish blue before I was headed off to school, and before school got out that day, he was already dead. So between like 7 or 8 in the morning and like 2 or so, because it was before school got out at 3, so he was already dead. So that's that. Uh, so after that, my birth giver kind of just fell apart as a human being. And then I ended up with my grandparents since my old man didn't have a place of his own. And so from like 12 or 14 to like my age, not the years, until 16 or so, I would still see my birth giver until I eventually got more memories of my childhood back of how bad it was. And then I disowned her, and then he and I, our relationship grew increasingly more tension filled as I was getting more and more tired of him never getting his shit together, basically. And as I more of my memories came together, and it's like he really could have tried harder to prevent her from being as shitty as she was to me. And so I always had to be independent to some degree, in that I had to outthink the adults in my life for pretty much all of my childhood. By the time I was, let's see, how do years work? Yeah, by 2018, 2020, when he was getting into hard drugs again because of his friends telling him, "Oh, you should do Adderall and stuff in order to stay awake at night for the newspaper route." We were drifting further and further apart because I didn't like watching him snort Adderall off his fucking truck dashboard. So that wasn't super great. Uh, by the time of like 2022, we weren't talking at all, I believe. And so, yeah, within the last, for like the last year or so of his life, we weren't talking. By that point, he owed me $2,400 or so. He was paying some of it off, but it's just like he would frequently borrow more money and then pay that off slightly, kind of a deal. The biggest was when he said that he needed money to keep his truck running so that he could keep his job. And so I paid for the parts. Uh and that was a big setback. That was like half my savings. And for a dishwasher, I didn't have a whole lot of savings, but it was thousands of dollars. So yeah, that was our relationship over the years. Next question. What is my favorite memory of the two of us together? Like I said before, I don't quite remember a lot of my memories. Maybe us being there for the Skyrim midnight launch was pretty fun. Uh, because we both love video games, and it was just such a festive time. This was 14 years ago, man. So the two of us got there, and there was already a bunch of fans already there waiting, like 5 or so of them. And then by the time they opened the doors, it was like a lot, like 50 maybe. There, one dude was dressed as a Viking, and he sat down on the floor and was playing, I assume, Settlers of Catan. I didn't know what game it was at the time, but knowing what I know, I think it was Settlers of Catan. And then once people saw that my old man had gotten me the the biggest edition you could get, the one with the Alduin statue and all that. Like there was a big cheer, and it's like, oh hell yeah, man. Yeah, I think I was 17-ish or so then, and so we were both gonna enjoy the game together. Him watching me play it since he I like my grandpa, not to the same extent though, because you play the God of War games for the most part. He struggled with like 3D environments and stuff. Like he could never master the idea of walking around and using a camera to like look around and stuff. Like he just couldn't do that. He couldn't do both. He couldn't use both sticks properly. Which, yeah, he played Alan Wake, so I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get how he got through most of that game. But that's probably one of my best memories with him was us going there and getting Skyrim and having a good night. That was pretty fun. I skipped the next day of school. That was pretty funny because 11/11/11 was I think it landed on Veterans Day and I was supposed to give a speech, but I wrote the speech, right? So I was like, you know what? I'll just let my partner do it. And so the teacher that like organized the thing was like, "Oh, you poor dear, you were like sick. Here, have a donut." And then some other kid who like skipped the day and then didn't come up with an excuse. She was like, "No donut for you." And I'm like, "Ooh, it feels good to get the donut." Next question. Was there a moment where you realized he wasn't just your old man, but a person with his own battles, history, and fears? Okay. Um, that's kind of like realizing that your teachers are people and not just like robots or whatever that live at school, basically. I would say in finding his like weaknesses and stuff as a parent and human being, that really pointed out his battles and all that sorts of stuff. I'm actually not breaking into tears right now. I'm like resisting uh heartburn, acid reflux. It sucks, man. Don't get it. Don't be born with bad genetics. If you were born with the same gene as me, what the fuck you doing, man? But yeah, I would say realizing the full effects of child abuse that my grandmother visited upon him and his responses to the abuse, which was like substance abuse, right? That's how he dealt with it. He used drugs to deal with the fact that he wanted to die growing up, same as my uncle. And so I watched my old man waste a lot of money, a lot of time, his health, all sorts of stuff growing up. Like, sure, yeah, he stopped doing the hard drugs for a long time, but the family altogether was spending about $10,000 a year on cigarettes. And that was a lot of money for a family that was consistently telling me, no, we can't replace the roof for $8,000. And I'm like, man, you can't even like get patch it. And they're like, no, we can't spend $300 on that rubber stuff you put on the roof so it doesn't leak. Where would we get the money from? And then they go out and smoke another cigarette. And it's, I remember at age 16, I sat them down with like Monopoly money and tried explaining it to them. And they were just like, we can't do it because grandma's a bitch and she'll be a cunt and we won't be able to handle the stress and we'll probably kill her or ourselves or each other. And it's just like, man, I am 16 years old. That was the same year that for my birthday, I didn't get anything, but he was like, if I'm ever on the machine, right? If I'm ever in a coma, you gotta be the one to pull the plug. And I'm like, isn't that like the doctor does that? And he was like, no, you have you have to do it. And I'm like, I don't think that's how it works, but okay. And he also made me promise the whole like, oh, don't let grandma get my body. And it's like, all these years later, I tried doing that stuff, and it turns out, oh, legally wasn't his kid. Can't do anything about it. Let's see. Next question. What do you wish you'd have the chance to say to him before he passed? Probably that I wasn't angry at him for the reasons that he thought I was angry at him for, and instead I was like, I really wish he wasn't, getting back into hard drugs. That wasn't, great. That was the main thing. And the other standard stuff you say to somebody that died suddenly, and the stuff like, "Oh, I love you, old man," stuff like that. Uh, that's about it for that, I think. Next question: how do you think he'd feel about you doing this investigation and sharing his story? He didn't like the idea, because I tried doing video biographical work for something I could do that felt meaningful to me in terms of like helping people because most people die without their stories being told, or like being able to be more easily told, and so you have to rely on just word of mouth down the family lines. The thing though is that over time memories fade and stories become incorrect and then eventually get lost. But the issues with, like, say, written biographies is that you miss out on the voice. And then for a while, I was just doing audio biographies. But the thing with those is that you miss the mannerisms, the facial expressions. So eventually, I upgraded to a after I basically paid off the audio equipment that I bought. I bought it on sale, so I upgraded. I spent like $2,500. The equipment that I'm currently using to record this and the laptop that this is being run through all came from the $2,500 plus the other stuff. The microphone setup I actually have that I'm using is cannibalized from 3 different sets I've acquired over time. And it's sort of like that one scene from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly where was it Tuco? Whatever the ugly the ugly dude hit when he put together the Franken revolver, kind of like that. And so my old man never let me do his biography. He was mental health illnesses run through the family. One of his things was extreme paranoia. He was worried that the county was run by Satanists and that the Satanists would find him and kill him because he was one of those wannabe Satanist teenagers in the 80s, and he thought that they were hot shit and that something bad was going to happen. That's not how this works. And so, yeah, I don't know if you necessarily approve of the manner I'm going through with this. He might think that's too dangerous to go after the person that murdered him and all that, got him murdered and all that. But it's just like, I think he would appreciate that I give a shit about him because I'm the only member of the family that really is putting in the efforts of trying to do right by him. Yeah. Because, I eventually was able to negotiate down to half the ashes after the chief of police got involved. I had to. That was on record that I had to give half the ashes. And so I think that he would at least appreciate that I'm trying. Meanwhile, basically nobody else is really trying in the family. I think that's it for that question. The next one is, how do you keep his memory alive in your day-to-day life? For the longest time, right, is that there's never not a time in which I'm thinking about him not being dead, right? It's almost like every single day is just, he's dead, I gotta work on the channel. Before I started working on the channel extensively, my days, I would sometimes go hours without thinking about the fact that he's dead. It was part of those mental blocks where it's just like, I'm not actively thinking about it, so I'm not being sad about it. Because for the longest time, I was just having constant panic attacks and anxiety attacks and all that stuff. Those already ran in the family. But it was like, at first, it was daily, and then eventually it went down to 2 to 3 times a week, and eventually just weekly, and then like every other week, and to the point where it was just like a monthly thing. And now it's just like once a season or so. But I think that's just the genetic part of it, right? And having, depression and all that. So I keep his memory alive through doing the channel, through playing the games, through trying to raise awareness for transgender people. And I think that's it for this question, right? Yeah. That's it for how do I keep his memory alive day to day. The next question is, what's been the hardest part about telling his story publicly? It is the anxieties that are always involved with creative endeavors, tied with the previous stuff about like, oh, I got to be careful of what I say because I don't want to get doxxed and stuff because it's an active. Yeah, it's saying it's an active murder investigation is kind of a misnomer by the sake of the fact that the cops didn't fucking even try, right? On the death certificate and all that, they didn't even do an autopsy. They didn't even crack him open. they were just like, huh, the guy who brought him here said that he had COPD, so I guess that's it. And so they signed off on it, saying that it was it. Though they did say it's like I can't remember the exact wording, but basically it's like they don't know what caused the death, but it's like it's probably COPD. But all the symptoms were stuff that makes sense for a drug overdose, and then the context that I've been given by one of his friends before, who knew him before he died, and like the days prior and all that, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. It does very much feel like it was a murder. I'm still trying to find out the why. I know the how sort of stuff, but I want to figure out why. What benefit would they've gotten? Maybe he was turning state's evidence or something, right? Because the one drug dealer did end up going to prison. So maybe she did it. Either way, the guy that got him back into hard drugs, I want to see him behind bars. Because he's tied to it somehow, right? Or at the very least, it's like the vindictive nature of like, well, you got my old man back into hard drugs, and that eventually caused him to get killed. So seeing him get arrested for drug possession or distribution, totally within like the wheelhouse of stuff that like that's yeah, I'll do that. But yeah, it's the hardest part. Other than that, is probably within the artistic endeavor of trying to do this right, trying to cover the games well enough. Admittedly, some of these videos haven't been the best that I could have put out, even with my current resources. But sometimes I don't have the energy or the time to put out the best videos I could have. Because sometimes it's the heat waves, especially. There's been because of global warming and all that, there's been a whole lot of heat waves and all that. They've been not great. But I think that's about it for that question. I do want to bring up some stuff since we're at like the halfway point or slightly past the halfway point. Technically, we're 2/3 into the questions, but there's like 3 categories I have in degrees of like how difficult they are to answer. But each category doesn't have the same number of questions, so it's a bit lopsided. We're maybe slightly over halfway done. But I would like to take the time out of the middle of the episode to say that I have a GoFundMe to help raise up the funds I need to do this investigation to cover things like gas, keep my phone on, all that kind of stuff, just like basic stuff that lets me take the time out to like go around, question some people, and I'll be covering the investigation on this channel via some of these podcast episodes, probably like one a month, or like if I get a big update, I'll include it as part of another podcast episode. Kind of like how with every podcast episode, I want to answer some questions. So any questions that you have in relation to my old man about trans masculine people, about video games, about any of the games that I'm covering, or about anything else really, if you ask them down in the comments, I'll cover any of the questions that are both in good faith and that I can reasonably answer in a future episode, right? And if you pay attention to my previous like videos, I'm fairly on it about answering comments. The only times I don't really do it is when either there's not much for me to say, it's a comment that I'm like iffy on the nature behind, or YouTube just straight up didn't show me that the comment exists. For the most part, I do get the pop-ups, but also sometimes they're not hidden, but I have to manually go into the video and then look for the questions because they're not in the like the dashboard stuff or whatever you would call it for the creators. But yeah, check out the fundraiser below. I also have a Patreon if you want to do extended stuff. There's a $15 tier for Patreon where I'll make a little video, and by little for me is like 10 to 15 minutes. Well, basically any topic you want. The video footage is still gonna be a video game, so I'm going to put over me discussing the topic you want me to talk about. Me basically anything really. A little video essay, and it can be either private or public. It'll be either unlisted or it's gonna be on the channel. Because I don't mind putting up additional content. That's just more watch hours for me. So yeah, if you'd like to support my endeavors, go ahead and head on down to the comments and leave all that good stuff. On to the first of the more difficult questions. How did being trans shape his life, both in how he saw himself and how others treated him? Well, let's see. He wanted to, you know, end it all for a good chunk of his life, so he turned to hard drugs. So that was not great. Let me double check some of the wordings of these. Okay. Parts of this will be answered, and if you might be thinking of will be answered in one of these future questions. But I would say that he struggled with self-image, all the classic stuff, probably dysphoria, gender dysphoria, and he became like a hedged hog in that he became prickly, but not. He wasn't generally an asshole. His temperament wasn't great, but he became somewhat Here's the thing, right? For all of his moderate assholery at times, he wasn't like a cunt that would like break into somebody's house or something. He was just like moody, right? Just kind of edgy, like Shadow the Hedgehog, right? The ultimate life form. I think it's a good way to describe it. Is that he like Shadow the Hedgehog? Uh, Man, I'm tempted to make so many fucking references to Sonic fandom. Be like, oh yeah, he totally pissed off. He totally pissed in a Hot Topic. He did shop at Hot Topic though, so yeah, he and Shadow the Hedgehog have a lot in common in that regard. Next question is, what did he teach you, directly or indirectly, about surviving in a world that doesn't always accept you? I would say that you need to live in open defiance of those that would see you harmed or killed, right? You need to understand yourself and what you want, and you need to do so unabashedly. Shame is only useful in the extent of self-reflection and not in hell as other people shouldn't be what pressures you into not being yourself. If just being yourself is just being non-hostile but different, right? In that he wasn't harming anybody by being different, but a good chunk of society, especially now with how things are, would see him in his grave. And here's the thing, he's already fucking dead, so there's that. So not an easy question to answer. But through my own efforts in existentialist philosophy and such, of seeing the abyss, right, and being like, well, if nothing matters, then I can do basically anything I want, and I want to make the world as best of a place as I can, regardless of the fact that global environmental failures are happening, and that just things are generally not going to get better overall. I don't see that really happening. But in your individual pockets of reality that you're stuck in, you can improve things for yourself and your loved ones as much as you can, and attempt to do so in an ethical manner. Of course, ethics, people tend to not agree on what is and is not ethical. So that's another conundrum to consider. The next question is, what do you think he'd want people to understand about him, especially those who only see his struggles or how he died? Regarding that, I'd probably say that he wants to know that people to know that he tried, right? That he lasted fairly long. And if things didn't go the way they did with him, between he and I feel like he would have lived longer. I feel like he would have stopped himself from getting killed if he and I were still on speaking terms. And the thing is, right, I just wanted him to get himself, because he basically lied to himself about being on drugs again, right? And I wanted him to be. For spending so many years having to parent him, I wanted to be able to look up to him again and to have a parent, right? And so because of that, and because it never happened again, yeah, we didn't talk for over a year. So I guess that what he'd want people to know about him was that he tried, and that's it for that. Next question is, what would justice or peace look like for you emotionally, not just legally? Peace is the absence of conflict. Uh, Justice is something entirely different. You can have justice and conflict. Oftentimes, people's imaginings of what justice is involves conflict or violence. Peace, for me, is the self-sustainability and the knowledge that I was able to prevent something like this from happening again for somebody, right? I've done a lot of work in helping to prevent people from ending up like him, in the context of originally I thought that it was self-inflicted, right? I'm trying to dance around words that YouTube doesn't like, and that's kind of an issue. But I would say that it is the sort of Zen-like state of not feeling. When he died, the immediate physical and emotional response from me was that of like a puppet that's lost its strings. I felt no attachment to the world around me. Because, like, if you think about the world in the context of yourself, you have connections, right? You have loved ones where you're like, even if you're not actively thinking about them, if you were to just a split second think about them, you're like, okay, they're over there. Or like places you've been, things like that. I felt no attachment to anything in the perceptible world when he died. And I that is a bad feeling, but I want the good feeling equivalent of not feeling beholden. I want to feel the world in a positive manner. I want to feel at ease with the world that I live in. I want to not feel like there's a timer going at all times, right? A sort of all consciousness that comes from knowing that I did what needed to be done. I fulfilled my oath, essentially. It is to be the good child to a dead parent. Is the justice that I seek, is the best way I can describe it, I think. Next question. How do you think people like him, specifically trans men, addicts, people who get overlooked, are remembered or forgotten by society? This is connected with the next question, which covers more of something that I was thinking about previously. But it is that often these individuals are heralded in their last moments of their life. The point of the channel is not so that his last moments are the focus point. They are an emotional anchor, yes, and they help draw people in by focusing on the fact that he's dead, right? And the emotional nature of his death and all that surrounds, right? Helps bring in the attention that I need in order to get the funding I need in order to do this at a sustainable level. But the focus on the channel, right, is to embrace the love of gaming that we had. It's one of the things that I was like, what can I handle and also make into a creative output for myself that I can't mentally lock myself away from, right? And it's gaming. Uh During my worst periods of depression, I just didn't play a whole lot, or like I couldn't finish games. My love for gaming was effectively gone. Now I'm forcing myself, even when I don't actively want to finish games, because sometimes it's just like, man, like I love Yakuza 0, but sometimes it's just there's some grinding going on where I'm just like, man, I just don't want to do it. But I'm like, I got to get a game out every month. So through forcing myself through that, right? I fulfill the artistic endeavor. And so I would like the passions that we shared to be how I can more easily remember him. And I'm hoping that as I find more peace, as things improve, and eventually I can go to a therapist, that would be nice. I'll actively be able to remember, I'll be able to have the memories back, right? Because I've already basically lost his voice. The voice, whenever I do think of it, it causes me basically both like mental and physical pain to an extent. I just get really sad. Is one way of it, but it's also just it's a neurological mental pain where it's like if you ever have nerve damage or like electrical feeling, just like pain, it's like that, but in the head. It's not quite a migraine. It's more just a electrical shock of like you shouldn't be thinking of this sort of thing. And I think that society doesn't want to admit to itself that these people are like the way that they are because of itself. Uh, People make up society. People make up the government. Society and the government both do bad things. And the people doing those bad things are people. It's something people don't want to admit, right? Whenever they say, oh, the government's doing this and the government's doing that. These people that are responsible for these things, including the enforcement, especially the enforcement, right? Right, is that law enforcement and all that are effectively traitors to their own people, and that they're enforcing the laws of those in power to inflict injustice, several injustices upon those not in power. Because to say that those in power are our neighbors and the like, and that are like normal people, is incredibly incorrect. They aren't our neighbors, right? They're secluded in their own estates. They're in penthouses. The 1% aren't really human. Or rather, they're not people. They're more akin to demons or something. They're on another level of inhumanity. Or rather, to say things are inhuman, right, is a bit, right? This is entirely unrelated, man. We're basically, what I'm saying, right, is that uh how is it said in 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 the Bridget game? It's like society didn't want to blame themselves, so they blamed the beasts, right? The Guilty Gear thing. Society doesn't want to blame itself for its shortcomings, both because society isn't a real physical thing, but it is um, almost on a metaphysical level a thing. It's a mess to try to explain these sorts of things in a way that's like understandable to somebody who hasn't really dived into socioeconomics, sociology, or philosophy in general. Next question, and this is the one that was really like, I gotta get to this eventually. What do you think people misunderstand about addiction, especially when it intersects with trans identity and poverty? Right, so, to make it clear, my issues, I have complicated things with addiction, but at the bottom line, the thing is, right, is that addiction is similar to the cessation of existence that people strive for, that I've actively helped to prevent, in that cessation of existence is an ultimate end to all potential suffering, while addiction is a way to dull the suffering enough to continue existence, right? And so poverty in general will lead to addiction in that it's not super expensive to be an addict until it is. Like, when you first get into it, right, it doesn't take a whole lot. But as you increase your tolerance levels and all that, it does increasingly get more and more expensive, especially to your health. And being trans, right? On top of all the other issues of poverty, mental illness, disease, things that actively make your life worse. Being born into the wrong body, as he would have said it, is another layer of fresh hell and another thing that can cause the suffering that you may feel the need to dull. And with that comes increased risks of cessation of existence, of addiction, of all sorts of things, right? So I would say that being an addict doesn't cause these things, right? And that addiction isn't a cause of, how do I word this? I'm trying to word it in a way that doesn't also just, because I've lost a lot to people being addicted and also just people with addictions. Like, my childhood wouldn't have been as messed up if my birth giver wasn't an addict, but she also wouldn't have been an addict if it wasn't for her mother's abuses. But she herself chose to indulge in addictions and then worsen as a human being. So it's not that being an addict will cause a person to be awful necessarily, because in some cases it degrades the brain, or like, because like, to some, or it's complicated, right? Basically, just be kind to people is the simplest way I can, is what I'm saying, trying to say. Be kind to people, and they will hopefully find the strength to continue on and be kind to themselves. Next question. How has this journey, both losing him and investigating his death, changed your understanding of family? This question has a lot of questions in it, if you really break it down. Because this is more than just one question. But also, I wouldn't describe losing him as a journey, right? But that's just the way that the thing that I found was worded, and I tried to rephrase it. But I also wanted to be like, yeah, you shouldn't really word it as a journey. That's holy shit, man. The process of losing him and the process of investigating his death, and then also the revelations of family being both your own family as well as family structures, right? I feel like these are three separate things. So I'll go and cover them individually. The process of losing him is one that, in relation, I'll tie them into family. Each one will relate to family. Losing him in connection to family has shown me, actually, it all is wrapped around one thing. Losing him has made me realize how weak my family was. Investigating his death and the beginning process of it has shown me also how weak my family is. And in general, my understanding of family in general is that when I say weakness, right? Weakness is the inability to defend and protect a thing, right? It's not just material wealth, though that helps, gathering resources, becoming self-sustaining as a familial unit. A weak family is one that doesn't back up its members. A weak family doesn't see justice be done. A weak family doesn't ensure that there is a future for the younger members of its family. So, in all manners, my family is weak and it failed. I wish to make my family stronger through my endeavors in both charitable works, which will make my family. I can help my younger cousins and stuff because that's the family, right? It's what's left of my family, basically. And I want to see to it that once they reach the two younger ones, once they reach of age, that they can become part of these projects. My one cousin, the eldest, I'm older than her, but she's the eldest of her siblings, will likely start her own channel eventually, and I'll be helping with that. She specializes in animal stuff, like speculative biology and all that, and she'll likely be on this channel as well. And so, through all of this, I guess the thing that I've gotten the most is that my family is and always was weak because those in positions of authority, for what authority they were given, they failed in that position. Every individual member of the family should be supported and emboldened and given the resources that they need to strive and succeed. You don't need one authority figure in a family, right? I don't believe in that sort of a thing. Sometimes, because of personal charisma and the like, or like wisdom, people might turn towards one individual within a grouping. Yeah. And so through that, you would then see a natural leader arise that would help guide others in their paths while ensuring that the right resources go to the right people when necessary, is the best way I can describe it. Next question. What's something you've learned about yourself through all this that he'd be proud of? My tenacity, I think. Because, as I said, I'm the only member of this family that's really giving a shit about his death. I helped secure the payment to get him cremated. I paid for both of the urns, the first one, and then I had to pay for another urn because I was legally forced to split up half the ashes. Then I'm actively investigating his death. That I give a shit enough to do memorial stuff for him. Despite getting half his ashes and specifically saying it's for this reason, my grandmother did not hold anything for him. No funeral, no nothing. There was no grouping of anything because he died of a drug overdose, and that's an embarrassment to the family. Right? And that's what they see him as. I tried for years to explain that he was addicted to hard drugs again. They didn't want to hear it. Yeah. I would say it's my refusal to give up and my persistence at what I'm doing. Next question. If this podcast helps even one person, someone grieving, someone who lost a trans loved one, what do you hope they take away? I don't like giving blanket positive hope to people, right? Just saying it gets better is bullshit. It can always get worse, but it could get better. I would say that if you are grieving, if you've lost somebody that is trans, if you yourself are going through hardship, I would say that I believe that you have the tenacity to endure. That you can live as a candle in the night. That you can be better than anybody had ever thought that you could be. And that's been part of the bulk of my work my entire life. My life's work has been trying to do more than just keep people alive, right? Because lengthening people's suffering isn't worth the action of preserving a life. I want people to be able to live more than just survive. I want them to be able to have worthwhile lives. I want them to feel the warmth that they've been denied. And that's a big part of it in my work, is that a lot of people haven't felt cared for or understood in a long time. So that is what I strive to provide for people when I can. Uh, there are typically resources that can help you. Uh, if you are at a disadvantage to get access to resources, I'm sorry. I don't know specifically how to help you because I get how those situations can be, right? You could be anywhere in the world. You could be facing any number of hardships. But know that chances are you can. Life can be worth living again. Old wounds can heal, even if they're still sore. That there can be a bright sunrise again that is worth seeing. That there's likely somebody out there who would willingly embrace you for who you are, and that the world doesn't need to be as dark as it is. The last and final question: if someone only heard one thing about him, what would I want it to be? And I would say that despite everything, despite his failures, despite his shortcomings, there are parts of him which eventually led to the better parts of me through a lot of work on my part. And that if I wasn't part of his raising of me helped bring about the lives saved that I have brought about. His greatest, as he said, his greatest contribution to the planet has been me. And while I'm trying to say it in a way that doesn't sound egotistical, but it was also a lot of pressure to know that I had to make up for a lot of generations of failure, of parents failing their children. And to say that somebody did their best implies that that's the best that they could have done. I felt like he could have done better, but also instead of saying that somebody did their best implies like they did like 100%, right? They put their all into it. I would say he put in maybe like 80%. So I would say that if you enjoy my work, the things that I do, parts of it is because of him, right? And I think that's the one of the best things that I could say is that there are parts of one parent that resulted in the best that I can be. Because I can't say the same for the other three primary people that were either involved with my conception or with raising me. They were all, I would just say, total failures, right? Just complete and utter abject failures. They died in such degrees of shame that there is nothing that anything they produced could be of anything of value, right? Nothing good came from their time on this planet. The world actively was worsened by them and their activities. Meanwhile, my old man, at the very least, I've saved the lives of 147 or 148. It's the numbers it fluctuates at times, but I've saved lives. I intend to save more. I want to help as many people as I can. And I hope that in some small way, that if you are going through things in your life that make it not feel worth living, that through my channel, through even if I just entertain you enough that it makes you want to watch the next episode, even just that is in part because of him. And with that, I guess we're at the end. I would like to thank you for watching if you watched it through to the end. I'd like to remind you that if you would like to support, I have the GoFundMe, I got the Patreon. Eventually the channel is going to get some of the memberships or whatever kind of stuff. Eventually for the Patreon, I want to do anime review and analysis type of stuff. And there's a lot of other projects I have planned. I still want to do charity projects like feeding the homeless and stuff. But for now, I guess I'll go briefly over future plans, because I have some notes regarding the future plans for the podcast. I'll be using the podcast to do stuff like this, answer questions, but I'll also be answering questions in other videos too. Like I'll do, for bigger games, I'll do a first impressions podcast episode, where it's just like, I'll take the footage from like the first hour or so, slap that on, and then put my audio over it. And so you can have like a first idea of what I think of the game. The questions episode specifically for some very small games that are like an hour to 5 hours, specifically ones that are like very text heavy that don't have spoken voices in them. Those would just straight up probably be just a podcast, because I can just put that up in the background as I talk about the game for an hour or whatever. As well as just any topical things. I'll try and have guests on. I want to have both friends and my cousin, other creators I would like to have eventually. That would be fantastic. Man, getting non-queer creators or just cis creators on here to say the trans rights are human rights, those are big wins, right? Getting somebody with any significant following on YouTube to come on and say that kind of shit is just fantastic. Would be fantastic. But like I just said, stay safe, stay strong, and remember that trans rights are human rights.